big news is franchising. Valorant franchising is beginning in 2023. That is giga enormous news. Unbelievable, massive news. Twitch.tv/Sideshow. So they just dropped this at fucking 9 a.m. on what even day is it? Thursday. They just dropped this out there into the universe like, yeah, cool, have a bit of this. So 2023 VCT is going to be franchised. And their plans are very interesting. Riot already works with a franchise approach in League of Legends, but they started with like an open circuit system kind of thing that then they transferred into doing franchise stuff. They've also got Overwatch League stuff to look from and learn from, the mistakes and the strengths and that kind of stuff too. So let's start at the super beginning. Riot should be in a great position to pull something like this off, but they've gone for some things very differently compared to even their league approach, right? So when I tweeted about this earlier on, I had a bunch of people saying to me, why would you even want franchising in this game? It's so much worse than doing an open circuit. Like, it's just bad. It's just bad. So I think a lot of the people who come from Valorant at the moment a lot of them are probably CS fans who've just seen open circuit stuff work and they like it and it's cool. You get to see like the, five nobodies can get together and become the best team in the world if they grind through all the open qualifiers and stuff. And that's how it currently works in Valorant. Let's start with the bad side of franchising, shall we? Let's start with the cons to franchising. Yeah, those open teams, the chip in a chair idea, the guard of this year, basically, right? Where it's just 5 people who are pretty unknown and they get together and they work really hard and they make it super far. That kind of idea is probably going to be pretty dead. So that's a major problem with, or a major downside, not a problem necessarily, but a major downside of a franchise system like the one that they're proposing. Another bad side of franchising, bad teams still get to stick around. There's no promotion, no relegation mentioned in any of their plans. So the teams that make it into, let's say the Americas one, where it's going to be North America competing against Brazil, LATAM, they have not indicated that there's any promotion, any relegation. It is just the teams that are in are in. And, of course, that means that you're going to be making roster moves pretty frequently at the end of a year. It's going to be more like, an Overwatch League model where teams scramble to make roster moves if they're shit and they try and, get better the next time around. Yeah, you've seen it before in traditional sports as well. If you're from North America, you understand how the system works. But you can sometimes get shit teams that just stick around for too long. And it sucks. If you have a league format with bad teams, it's incredibly boring. Oh, bro. You think it's boring as a fan. Imagine having to go out there and sell it like it's fun. Oh, it's unbelievable. So if you end up stuck in a league format where you play every week and you have bad teams, it can be incredibly boring. But those, as far as I can see, those are the big downsides. But there are a lot of positive sides too. So the idea of franchising is, 10 teams from the Americas, 10 teams from EMEA, 10 teams from the APAC region, and they get together and they partner with Riot and they lock themselves into, again, just spitballing here, a 5-year contract where they say, hey, let's work together for those 5 years. We have a guaranteed spot. We know that we're going to be involved every year. We can use that in order to sell sponsorships against it. We can use that in order to invest in our team long term. We can use that to create content that we know, we're not just pissing it away because we might, not make it into the next open qualifier. So it allows the partner teams to be much more invested in their team, their spot, because they have that long-term guarantee. And they can plan around that as well. It also means that you'll have regular LAN matches happening constantly. That's crazy. That has not happened before in Valorant. I mean, it's not that crazy. It should be normal, but it's just not a thing that was in Valorant at all. So you've got regular LAN matches. If you think back to like 2018 Overwatch League, if you think about how any of League of Legends works, you're in a venue. Let's say that it was happening in Los Angeles, for example, because that's where LCS is based out of. They could pick any city, but all right, let's just say it's Los Angeles. You've got a Brazilian team there, a LATAM team there, maybe a couple of Brazilian teams, a couple of LATAM teams, and then 6 North American teams, something like that, all together, and they're playing round-robin format or some kind of format where there is regular weekly play against each other, and then occasional playoffs that qualify you to a Masters event, something like that. That's sick. That's so much better in terms of the quality of competition that we currently get when you see teams running through these big qualifiers. It's kind of similar to what they did this year with the teams that actually made it to stage 1. You still get the big events on top of that. That's their plan. The tournaments you know and love aren't going anywhere. There's still going to be multiple Premier level global tournaments, Masters, Champions, etc. Game Changers too will continue to have a championship event. They also said here, a little sneak peek, we're working on making live audience a thing for this year and for the future. I mean, obviously for the future, but they're currently working on making a live audience work this year in 2022, which is PogChamp, in my opinion. Extremely PogChamp. Yeah, you still get the Masters, you still get the Champions, but the point being that these teams are kind of have that long-term stability of being put into the structure anyway. Why else would you want a franchise system? Well, some of the biggest reasons to have a franchise system is that it's much easier to sell broadcast rights. It's much easier, frankly, to just sell against your product in general. If you're a team, you can sell sponsorships more easily because you know that you have a guaranteed amount of watch hours that you're going to be able to sell against. You know that the league is going to be going on for X amount of years, or at least you have a contract for X amount of years. You know there's going to be X amount of matches in the season. You know that they're going to be on broadcast for this often. You can sell against that way more easily than saying, hey, sponsor our Valorant team. We think we're going to make it this year. We might make it to Masters. Maybe. That would be cool. Like, you have no concept of that. You can sell those sponsorships way more easily as a team, but as a as Riot here, the broadcast rights are the big thing to be looking at. So broadcast rights much more easily sold when you know exact amount of watch hours, when you control the entire circuit. They might run into some trouble with the broadcast rights involving co-streams. Maybe they'll have to cut down on some co-streams or pay people or whatever. I don't know, but that's a bridge that needs to be solved when they get to it. They also hinted here at there being some kind of team skins or something in the game. So here they said, with a lovely picture of Boaster, with this evolution of our ecosystem will come the ability to support your favorite teams. Okay, very vague, really giving nothing away. While watching or playing, we want to give you more ways to flex your fandom. Now, to me, while watching, we want to give you more ways to flex your fandom. I mean, that is just nothing. I mean, that could just be, we're going to sell you a hat or whatever. But while playing, we want to give you more ways to flex your fandom. That heavily implies to me that they're going to be doing stuff like the partnered teams get specific, skins or like a banner within the game or something like that. And that is enormous. I can't even explain to you how enormous revenue stream. Just a giga ultra banging revenue stream for teams. You saw it at Champions, right? You saw how much the Champions skin made, and that was even while Riot were taking a 50% cut. No idea what their cut would end up being from a situation like this. Maybe it's a gun buddy. Maybe it's not a full skin, but maybe it's a little gun buddy that has like optic on it or whatever. Those kind of things I think would do bits for the teams. So yeah, that's another massive pro to franchising, because that kind of revenue stream would just simply not be available via the open system. I mean, you're asking the artists who work on Riot or work on Valorant to create an infinite amount of these, or wait until the teams who qualify for Masters or Champions are locked in and then have like a 2-day turnaround to try and produce them so that they have enough time. There's no good way of making personalized digital cosmetics in an open circuit system outside of, maybe the teams that made it to Champions got one afterwards or something. It's way, way easier in a system like this. So, there are a lot of advantages on the business side, mainly, for why franchising is really a good thing for the teams that are involved. And yeah, that means that teams and orgs are going to be left on the outside as well. Reducing the pool, you're able to sell more and split it among less, so everybody that's involved benefits to a very high degree, or at least a much higher degree than if they're involved in an open system. It doesn't necessarily mean that the players are going to be left out in the cold just because their organizations are. Let's use Gambit actually as an example, because they're currently left out in the cold because of the fact that they're a Russian organization and have Russian players at the moment too. But let's say for 2023, there's no war happening, no particular reason to be penalizing the Russian organizations, but they just don't make it in. They just don't get selected as one of the partners. That doesn't mean that all of the mech players currently are going to be left out of franchising. That's not a reasonable conclusion from that. it's very possible that you're going to see organizations involved who've never been in Valorant. Riot might have pre-existing relationships with them from League of Legends. Maybe they're the kind of organizations that only had a Game Changers team and now want to, they were just kind of sticking around to see if they could get a spot into franchising. And then you're also going to see organizations, I'm sure, who end up getting selected to be involved, but they have terrible teams currently. So they are, in some sense, forced to make changes and pick up those good talents who've been left on the outside. And the reason that they're forced to do that is because you just tank your reputation if you lose over and over again in a franchise system. Even though there's no relegation, so in theory, you could sit at the bottom of the pack and just get pummeled repeatedly over and over again. If you get relegated, you can win the level below you. Like, if you get relegated to Tier 2, you might actually be able to win Tier 2 and look good again. But in a franchise system, if you're bad, you are just going to get kicked in the head season after season, and you're going to become a joke of an organization. And that shit will follow you. It will follow you. I know it. I've seen it in Overwatch League as well. There is a pressure on teams to actually sign good talent. It's not the case that it removes all of that open market pressure and teams end up just having garbage teams. There's a couple of other questions that are raised from this too. So they're talking about team partnerships. So they aren't necessarily calling it a franchise model. They're calling it a partnership model. So, okay, I don't really know what the difference is there. From what I can see, it's pretty similar to, the franchise model that we've seen elsewhere. But one of the big differences actually is this one. To make sure we attract the best teams in the world, we will forego any participation or franchising fees and instead provide financial stipends to the selected teams in return for their investment in growing the ecosystem. Just take a moment to process that. While the Overwatch League was reportedly asking for like 10, 20 million, and I don't know whether there was higher stuff than that as well, instead of asking, your Cronkies of the world or the huge Patriots backers or whatever, the big money people, instead of trying to get in bed with those people, Riot are not asking for a franchising fee. They instead are going to be providing stipends to the teams, and they are considering the teams being involved. And, I'm sure there's going to be some mandated stuff that teams have to do with regards to that. But they're considering the teams being involved as, their investment within the ecosystem. So what does this mean? This is a mad game changer, people. This is a mega game changer. The more you think about it, the more stuff it changes. So, first of all, what does zero franchise fees mean? It means that Riot can be way more selective with the people that they partner with, right? So, instead of having to search for the people that can afford to pay, let's use 20 million just because that's what Owl was reportedly charging. Riot can be more selective about people that they actually want to work with. Like, who do they think makes the best content? Who do they think has the best vision for the future? Who's been the most loyal to them throughout this period of time or whatever? Who have they enjoyed working with in their League of Legends partnerships? That kind of shit, right? Who do they think is actually going to win? Who do they think is not going to just abuse the system like the fucking LA Valiant did in Overwatch League, where they just decided, actually, we don't really want this spot. Let's just ship it off to China and get a dogshit team that ruins one of the slots. That kind of thing can be avoided if you're trying to be much more selective with your partners. It means that Riot are willing to shoulder the burden in terms of risk and money invested into this system until it becomes profitable. It'll be quite a while until any of these things are profitable, I think. Listen, I'm not on the inside loop when it comes to, the spreadsheets and shit like that. But from my conversations with Overwatch League team owners and from my just understanding generally of how the space works, that's normally going to be a multi-year commitment before you end up turning a profit, even if things go really well. And that is not being put onto the teams. Riot have decided they are going to shoulder the risk involved in setting up a league like this. If Valorant tanks 2 years from now, it's Riot who are in the fucking gutter. It's not the teams. So that makes it way more attractive for the teams to get involved. It's a much smaller risk from their part. And I think it also shows a serious commitment from Riot that it's not just a cash grab. That to me, I think that to me indicates a quiet confidence in Valorant and Riot being willing to just take on board all of that risk. which also means that the teams who are partnering, right? These teams that get in on the ground floor and partner with Riot for X many years, they can actually focus their expenses instead of having to pay. And by the way, whenever you pay a franchise fee, it's not normally like 10 million up front or whatever. It's normally like spaced out X amount every quarter. You know, if you sign a 5-year contract, then that'll be, you know, priced out throughout it, as if you know how people in America buy a car and then they pay for like some of it every month or something. I don't know. Never done that before. But do you understand the base principle of paying for things quarterly rather than all up front, I'm sure. But instead of having to actually have that as a massive expense for the teams, they can focus on stuff like invest that money in making sick content, in making, you know, like events outside of that, the things that cost money that help grow the brand of the teams and therefore the brand of the game and the league. They can actually focus their expenses in that area instead of having to focus it on paying their franchise fees. And I think that will grow the product more than paying Riot would grow the product. I mean, if you're just paying $1 million to Riot every quarter or whatever, in what way is that really helping the league? So this seems like far more of a tit-for-tat relationship with teams, which is potentially why they've chosen to call it a partnership model rather than a franchise model. I'm not sure. But it seems like they're trying to structure it as a partnership here, where the idea is that the teams are highly incentivized to actually invest in the product. If you're looking at this from a very cynical point of view, what would Riot be trying to get out of this? Now, it's possible that Riot would try to be making the long-term benefits as small as possible for the partner teams. So what I mean by that is, if Riot are the ones shouldering the financial risk involved in setting up a league like this, then it stands to logic that they should also be getting the majority of the benefits if it pays off. So things like a broadcast rights split, are they planning to take a much larger percentage of the broadcast rights compared to, you know, how their League of Legends system is structured or how Overwatch League is structured? Possibly. That might be, you know, the long-term goal for Riot here, is that they see, holy shit, Valorant's popping off. Why don't we actually put the money up front so that we can get more of the benefit later down the line? So this investment into Valorant franchising in 2023 might indicate the lowest risk franchise model that you could get involved with. But it might, I mean, who knows until you've actually seen what they're offering, but it might have less upside to it. On the other hand, I think another thing you have to ask is 2023 the right year to actually do this? Because they're planning on kicking it off, I mean, presumably January, which is, 8 months from now? I think there's a few questions there, right? Is the viewership there? Yeah, I think the viewership is there. For 2023 to begin franchising, yeah, the viewership is through the fucking roof. I mean, I think if you had another year of the same stuff, people would be wondering why they're not ramping up. Are there enough organizations that are interested? I think that depends on where you are in the world. There might be enough orgs interested, but there might not be enough orgs who are big enough who are interested, because the orgs also have to have enough infrastructure to be able to pull something like this off and execute it effectively. And yeah, sure. I mean, I'm sure a lot of orgs will be, maybe interested is the wrong word, but are there enough organizations with the experience and infrastructure to actually pull off something like this who also want to be involved? But yeah, like the zero franchise fee, the stipend, all of these things should be attractive to organizations. But when you start talking about the APAC League, for example, where they're going to potentially need representation from the Oceanic region, maybe that's my own ignorance talking, but I'm not sure that there are Oceanic organizations who are at the size of to be able to, do very much of this. Have the events been good enough? Have the events been run well enough thus far across 2021 and 2022 that there is faith they would be able to execute franchising in 2023 effectively across 3 separate leagues all run by Riot? And I think that's the biggest sticking point for me. Tekovic, as Lothar was calling it, had a bunch of issues that they ran into. And overall, there are still a lot of things that you would want to improve, that I would want to improve about the product, about the way that it's run, before kind of tripling the size of the circuit. at the moment, it's third-party tournament organizers running these circuits, right? It's Nerd Street Gamers are running the one in North America. It's Freaks for You are running the one in Europe. Riot's own team doesn't really run the meat and potatoes of the Valorant circuit right now. And I think that's going to be a massive wake-up call going into 2023 and something they need to be super ready for. So that to me is a big question mark, a very big question mark. There is no replay viewer in the game right now. The HUD was breaking constantly throughout Masters Reykjavik.
Something where he puts it up and
at least put the fucking name of the teams there, man. Do I gotta take care of everything here?
NIP completely barrel onto this beast.
Gotta do everything on this fucking broadcast, huh?
They don't have a unified rule set. You know, there are so many problems right now with Valorant as a competitive esports title that just kind of get glossed over because people love the game and because it's a great fucking game and because when the production works, it looks really slick. There are a lot of issues that make me worried about launching straight into this for 2023. And of course, Riot is proven with League of Legends. You're quite right, King Braid. And Call of Duty. You're right. Call of Duty has success and stinks. But also, ain't nobody watching Call of Duty right now. And you don't want to be put in that position when you launch your franchised league, when you just fuck it up and people decide they don't want to watch. The other thing from my point of view is, are there even enough casters to be able to pull this off? I don't think there are right now. Like, just from my own selfish little, world where I'm just thinking about the broadcast talent, there are not enough broadcast talent that are tier 1 right now to be able to fill out 3 separate leagues happening all around the world. You've got 3 simultaneous leagues that all want to be broadcasting in English language, I would imagine. One happening in the Americas, one happening in EMEA, and one happening in APAC. And you need a broadcast team for each one? What? That feels like they're going to have to work really hard this year, really hard, to get people up to speed on that stuff and find upcoming talent, get those talent locked in. Some of the talent won't want to move, by the way. Some of the talent aren't down to, let's assume, they haven't announced this and it might be completely wrong, but let's assume that it happened in LA, Berlin, Korea, because that's where the League of Legends stuff is based. Does all of the talent want to move to those locations? I don't know. You might actually lose some talent in this switch. And I don't think they have enough at the moment. I think there's also questions to be asked about how this system would even work. Because if you look at... all right, let me show you what they said in the article, right? It says, currently we plan to introduce 3 leagues around the world that will include teams from multiple regions based on geographical proximity. Teams from North America, Latin America, and Brazil will make up one league. Teams from Europe, Russia, Turkey, and MENA will make up another league. And teams from Southeast Asia, Korea, Japan, South Asia, and Oceania will make up another league. So it's kind of like geographical proximity, but also time zone based, basically, right, as well. So, if you're from anywhere in the Americas time zones, you'll tune into that tournament probably. If you're from anywhere around Europe at all, you'll probably tune into that time zone and that broadcast. And if you're from anywhere in APAC, you'll probably tune into that time zone as well. But they also said that we'll incorporate a long-term partnership model with a select number of teams in each league, ensuring representation of all regions. Now, I don't know how they're going to do this, but let's think about this from a basic point of view, right? You've got a Americas league that has North America, Latin America, and Brazil. What is the split of organizations there? Do you require a certain amount of orgs from Brazil and LATAM? Are they then locked into only picking up teams or players from that region? How do you enforce any kind of requirement to have player representation from these regions, especially when your regions become much more diverse? For example, Europe, Russia, Turkey, MENA. Are you going to require organizations from Russia? Are you going to require organizations from South Asia or Oceania? I feel like this is going to be a really difficult system. And if you don't have requirements for player representation, the Americas League could just become the North American League. It could very easily. There might just be, one team from Brazil, but if crew end up dropping off, are you going to invest in crew or are you going to try and invest in a North American team that has access to North American sponsors, which are way bigger than LATAM sponsors, and your pool of talent that you can draw on is far bigger than any LATAM pool. You know, like there are conflicts within these leagues that are going to make it difficult, I think, unless there are rules in place to guarantee representation from the regions. And if those regions have guaranteed representation, that puts certain orgs in handcuffs. You know, if, let's say, Crew were the team that bought into the American League, if that team has a requirement that they are always a LATAM team, like 3 out of 5 of their team must always be from Latin America as defined by, you know, they're from South America but not from Brazil, that limits their pool that they're working with, the player pool, their talent pool, massively. And there's no guarantee that they're ever going to be able to win that league. That's not a thing that they can ever guarantee, or even, I mean, there's no guarantee for any team, but you are at such a disadvantage compared to the other teams that are competing in there as well. They're already limited, so what's changed? What's changed is that they are now interacting with each other week by week. So for example, you could make it so that you just get, let's say, 10 organizations, and they buy into the Americas League. They are then free to pick up whoever they like from the Americas region. But if you do that, you are going to have massive bias towards North America because it has a massively higher marketing budget, and if you get fans from North America, they spend more per viewer. You're going to see just a shift in that direction, and maybe you'll have like a couple of teams from South America. If you dictate that certain orgs have to be the Brazilian or LATAM orgs, that also means that if Brazil and LATAM explode, you've got a bunch of shit North American teams in there. Do you get that point as well? Like if you have, let's say you have 10 teams and 6 of them are from North America and 4 of them are from South America. But over the course of the next 5 years, South America becomes way better. And you've already locked the North American teams into, you must pick up players from North America. Do you see how that also, again, creates issues there too, right? Let's take the example of the APAC region. If you allow people to pick up from anywhere, then you are not going to have a South Asia and Oceanic team. I just don't think you would. If you had 10 teams and you just said to the orgs, you can pick up players from anywhere, they'd be picking up from the regions right now that have shown success. They might trial a team from India, or they might trial a team from Australia, but in all likelihood, they're going to end up fixing on the top teams from APAC, you know, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Korea, Japan, with Zeta Division as well, right? If you allow them to pick up from any region, you will not have representation of all the regions involved. You just simply won't. In a region as culturally and lingually diverse as this. Lingually? Is that a word? But a league with this much language diversity, you just won't. There'll be no reason to do so. If you enforce it, if you say there must be teams, let's use 10 for example, then you have to find an organization from Oceania and an organization from South Asia. You have to hope that they're going to be competitive. Otherwise, you've got the same issue that we ran into last year, where we had regions where you just knew they were going to get blown the fuck out. And in fact, Masters Reykjavik is the first time that those expectations were properly subverted. And you still had LATAM going out in first. Like LATAM going out first. One of the APAC teams going out first. My point is that the way in which they enforce this representation vastly changes how competitive and how well represented these leagues are going to be. The split of the orgs will dictate where they pull players from, based on their infrastructure, based on their language barriers, that kind of stuff. And APAC looks like it should be the most culturally diverse league out of the 3. You will have a ton of foreign players. I mean, let's assume it was happening in Seoul in Korea. You are going to have a fuck ton of people playing in Korea who don't speak the language at all, who are in a very different environment for 8 months out of the year. It's going to be a huge melting pot if you enforce that representation, which would be fucking cool to see. But also might be a bit of a burden on those players playing in, 8 months out of the year away from home in such a different environment. I know it was when people went and played in Apex. I know it was for the Korean players when they moved to LA for Overwatch League, and I'm sure that also extends to League as well. It seems like a much more diverse pool in APAC if that region distribution is enforced. And of course, the number of slots is also massively important too. How many games are going to be happening per week? Holy. How many games are going to be happening per week? How many hours are going to be broadcast per week? Because that tweaking the dial just a tiny bit there can take you from being hungry as a fan to being bored out of your fucking mind. I have my own idea about how much is a good amount, but I also try and follow many different regions. And I know that that's not the norm for fans. Most fans live in a time zone, and they're probably going to watch that time zone. And they might not even watch all of the games that are happening. They might just have, you know, a couple of teams where they tune in and they watch those. And then, you know, they tune in and watch their playoffs at the end or something. If we make the assumption that the calendar is somewhat similar to the 2022 year, they talked about having an off season. They haven't said exactly how long the season would be. Yeah, if we assume that it's a similar format to this year, then you have about 18 weeks out of the year to run your league play. And what I mean by that is they're still going to be running Masters and Champions, and they take a huge block of the year out. So if you think about how much time is actually in this year, 2022, how much time does the group stage, the qualifiers, all of that shit take up? It's about 6 weeks each time. It's about 6 weeks, then you get into a Masters. Then 6 weeks, get to a Masters. 6 weeks, LCQ Champions. So you have about 18 weeks to run your league play for 2023, assuming they have a similar system and they don't run more playoffs than usual, something like that. So to me, that feels like about one match a week is what you're looking for there. If you have one match a week, you have 18 matches. 18 matches is still quite a lot of matches, especially when you're running 3 simultaneous leagues around the world. That's going to be a lot of fucking games for people to watch. I think it would be a bit outrageous to run anymore. I think having 2 games a week, or like sometimes you have 1 game, sometimes you have 2 games, I think that would be too much. And I say that from watching Overwatch League go from having 40 games each a year, which was stupid, absolutely stupid, to dipping down to 16 last year, and the fans thought that that was a little too little, and then they wanted to ramp it up a bit. Personally, I think 18 with the big events is perfect. So if they end up getting a lot of teams involved, and there's going to be a lot of teams that want to be involved because there's no franchise fee and because you get a stipend to play and because it's fucking Valorant and there's so many people want to get involved in this shit. If you have a lot of people that get in at the beginning and you play any more than 1 game a week, even if you play 1 game a week, you might be putting out more content than anyone can possibly watch. I do think, though, that the LAN play idea is just a game changer. It really is. LAN play has just been reserved for the big events so far, and having it every week, day in, day out, is going to add so much more personality to the broadcast. You'll be able to see the players. You'll be able to have regular content made around the players, not just internally, but externally from the press, who are going to be able to have access to people much more often. You'll have people getting used to the LAN environment before they go on to playing at a Masters event. You know, you won't be benefited by just being an onliner kind of team that can't deal with the pressure. It's massive. Crowds available to attend every week. I mean, that's just, it's sick. It's going to be so fucking good. When we began this video, I started the very beginning of this conversation by what are the bad sides about franchising? And so just to revisit that, it was that open teams don't get into the big events. So think about like the Guards run from this year. They wouldn't get into Masters. A team that just comes out of nowhere wouldn't be involved in franchising to begin with. There are ways around that. There are ways of mitigating that massive detriment of the franchise system. There is already going to be a Challengers-esque system underneath the current one. They said there was going to be domestic leagues. So building off of VCT Challengers, domestic leagues will continue to offer higher levels of organized competition for the best players in each region. If you look at this graphic, it's showing you the tiers, right? So it's showing you the global tournaments, Masters Champions at the very top, and then your international leagues are your tier 2. It's not really tier 2. It's still going to be tier 1 competition, but it's not, you know, like, it's not where you crown the winner, right? That's going to happen at the global tournaments. But this is still tier 1 competition happening in your franchise leagues. And then your third-party game changers and domestic leagues are classed here as like tier 2. I know it says tier 3 on the graphic, but this would be what people would refer to as tier 2 competition. Let's look at the domestic leagues. This is basically the same as Challengers right now. So, you know, open qualification, you can get in, you play. If you do well, awesome, fantastic, you've done spectacularly. What I would like to see them do, and they haven't committed to it here, but I really think this would be a massive, Massive difference. If you win your domestic league, you get a wild card to Masters. And maybe it doesn't work exactly like that. There's a couple of ways that you could do it. For example, you could send one wild card from each region. So you would send 3 wildcards. Or you could send a bunch. Let's say you send 3 from each region and they played a gauntlet at the event. So like Masters Reykjavik is kicking off. In the week before Masters Reykjavik, these tier 2 teams all play a gauntlet to decide who's going to get passage through to the group stage. So that way that you don't necessarily have you don't have one team guaranteed from each of the 3 regions. You could have it weighted towards one of the regions if they were just simply better than the others. Do you see what I mean there? So it would be like an LCQ kind of event, but I think that would be super cool. That's way too much. Like bottom international league teams could be better than domestic league teams. Yes. And that is why people like Overwatch League have always been afraid to do that. But guess what? There's no reason to be afraid. It's only a good thing. All of these things, right? Having a wildcard entry and having like this Cinderella story of, somebody gets through and they end up beating the teams. That does not devalue your domestic teams. What it does is it draws attention to the tier 2 scene and shows you how much talent you have available there. You get these sick fucking Cinderella stories. You get upcoming talent that actually get their shot at the big events. And you never end up with stagnant players at the bottom of your domestic leagues because they get swapped out because you can see that they are worse than the other players that are involved. Let me tell you exactly what would happen in Overwatch League if this had existed from the beginning. You send your team, a little, I don't know, Boston Uprising Timmies or the Florida Mayhem or whatever, play in some third-party tournament at the end of the year, or they play at some finals qualification, and they have to play against Runaway, or they have to play against Element Mystic. If they get their shit kicked in, those players are going away next season and you're getting more fresh talent from tier 2, right? And that doesn't devalue you next year. That means people are more excited to see your tier 2 talent because they know that they can beat some of the tier 1 talent that they've been watching all year. It is only a benefit. And it fucking melts my brain how the suits seem to believe that it like devalues your product. Your product is the entire game. Your product is the whole fucking game, including the tier 2 scene. Your product is not just the franchise league. Your product is the excitement, the attention that is on your entire system. And if you have a system that flows talent in, they're going to be more excited to watch those new players. It is only going to be beneficial for you in the future. They said here there's going to be some third-party tournaments, but I don't even know what to think about this because they said there was going to be some this year, like from September onwards, and we don't even know how well that's worked. So I think you have to kind of wait until September, October, November, December, see whether the third-party tournament window was effective in 2021. And if it was, you can get excited. If it wasn't, why wasn't it effective? What needs to be changed for the future? Some of the things that I think would be working best is that you should probably have a circuit mapped out in advance. Try and get, instead of waiting until the end and then just kind of surprise, are there any third-party people around? Really try and build out a circuit, some branding, have, your ESL's DreamHacks, Flashpoint, whatever. Make them invitationals, have Riot talking to them many months in advance. And I think it's naturally going to create really cool third-party tournaments because some of the... Okay, if you're like an ESL or whatever, you want to invite all the best teams, but some of those teams are going to decline. Their players are going to want rest. Their teams are going to be rebuilding. They're going to be making roster moves, whatever. And so some of the top tier 2 teams that were playing in the domestic leagues and maybe got a wild card entry or something and did pretty well, those top tier 2 teams are going to be super hungry to win and to show that they can beat some of the tier 1 teams. And that is the perfect time to get people excited about new talent, because that is always the off season where people are making crazy roster moves and you need eyes on new talent at that point in time. It's kind of dull in Overwatch how little people know about the tier 2 players when they come into the league. There's always people on the Reddits and stuff who are like, yeah, I've been watching this guy for 7 years. He's fucking sick. He's awesome. But the majority of people just don't have a clue because the tier 2 scene was left and abandoned. And these kind of things with the third-party tournaments and like wildcard editions could make such a huge, monumental difference to that kind of attitude and to how well your system flows overall. Big picture takeaways from this is that it's incredibly exciting. There's a lot of stuff that I think they're doing really well I think you have to give them massive props for going for the 0 franchise fee model. Is just an enormous shouldering of the risk that frees up their partner teams. It's gonna be incredible if they manage to pull it off, but like I said, there's definitely still areas where I'm concerned about, the devil being in the details, and also their ability to actually execute on a plan like this, based on the, I would say, mostly successful, but definitely with some major hiccups, kind of reputation that the big events currently have within Valorant. I think if you were to surmise the Valorant Masters and Champions events, it would be broadly very successful and doing some extremely cool shit. Like, some of the stuff that Valorant does is the best, hands down, across esports, in my opinion. Some of their stage design stuff, some of their feature piece creation is just phenomenal. But then there's some other major roadblocks that they have yet to really work their way through. So, yeah.